again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. It feels alright when they come and say to you.
Welcome along to Steve Wraith's NUFC Matters, and we've got a special interview today. Dave Fishwick's joining us. How are you, Dave?
Fabulous. Living the dream.
Yeah, you definitely are. And those of you who may say, well, I recognise that guy, but where do I know him from? Well, of course, the Bank of Dave. And it has become not only an institution, a well-known institution in the country, but it's also become now a wonderful film. It's a family film. I sat and watched it with my family a couple of weeks ago. And you know what? I felt compelled to reach out to the man himself and get him on the podcast and listen to a little bit of his life story and what he's up to now. So welcome, Dave. Great to have you on.
Thanks for letting me come on. It's always a pleasure to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and I've seen it. I mean, you know, coming from I think the BBC and Sky to YouTube, but it shows you're a man of the people, and that for me is what stands out about you. But let's go back into your past a little bit, Dave. Just tell us a little bit about you know your upbringing. Where were you brought up?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I come from a place called Burnley, centre of the universe. Just in case anybody didn't know, I was born in Burnley General Hospital. It's a tough place to live, but it's a wonderful place to live. I left school at 16 years old, absolutely useless, no qualifications whatsoever. Ended up on a building site. I was a builder's labourer, got paid just under 30 quid a week, which was the YTS back then. So it's just over a £5 a day with my bad Burnley maths. And to be honest, my mum and dad were incredibly poor, so I had to work. There were no chance of college or university or anything. It was straight from school, straight onto the building site. Up and down ladders, bucket of cement in each hand, pebble dashing the sides of big factories, on roofs, reslating. It were proper graft.
Proper graft, yeah. And I mean, that in itself, you know, probably, you know, it should have been the end of the story. But, you know, what happened after that?
Well, I mean, my story is how do you go from being a builder's labourer to building the first new high street bank for over 120 years in Britain, and Netflix turning up, by the way, and making a Hollywood movie that come to #1 on Netflix. So in between there's a story, and it's a bonkers story. But I mean, I always wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to start a business. But the problem is, if you have no money whatsoever, how do you start something with nothing? You know, I didn't have the price of a gallon of petrol, Steve. And I just thought to myself, do you know what? I want to do something. But I remember being up and down the ladders, on the building site, always hungry, in the chippy, wanting a chip butter. I went in, and this particular time, I remember it as if it's yesterday. And I went in and I asked for a chip butty, and it was 37 pence. And the lady behind the counter, she's cooking the chips and she's frying everything and she's buttering the bread. I stuck my hand in my pocket and I pulled out 30 odd pence, and I was 3 pence short. And I thought, she's already put salt and vinegar on now, Steve, so she's not going to take a handful of chips off the top. But I said to her, look, I'm ever so sorry. I'm a few pence short. Could you just take a handful of chips off? And that's all I can afford you, knowing or thinking that she weren't going to do that. And do you know what she did, Steve? Took a handful of chips off the top and threw them in the bin. And I thought, I just don't want to be poor. And I thought, if I ever see that chippy for sale, I'm going to buy it and sack her. Because back then it were hard. Everything were really hard. I mean, I grew up in a two down terraced house in Nelson, which is just next to Burnley. And I was 10 years old before I knew that anybody had an inside toilet. You know, we always had an outside toilet, and I didn't know inside toilets exist until I got past 10. And we had no money for toys. We had no money for anything. But I had my big brother Andrew, who's a fantastic carpenter. And he was so skilled then when we were kids. And we used to go up on top of the tip and we'd dig out some old pram wheels and some old wood and a bit of string and rope, and we'd knock a go-kart together. And we'd have hours and hours of fun on the go-kart down the back street. And we'd no money for plasticine or anything like that. But what we'd get, we'd break a bit of glass, and we'd magnify some gas tar outside on the cobbles, and we'd mould it into a bit of plasticine, and we'd use that. And we just found ways when you've got naught to move forwards. And that's what I took through my life, really. If you've got nothing, you've only got one way to go, and that's upwards. And if you believe in yourself, and that self-belief, the confidence, and you truly want to make a difference, I have some rules, and rule number 3 is never give up, and rule number 4 is never, ever give up. And I think that it don't matter where you come from or where you start, it's where you finish that counts.
You mentioned your childhood, and you say, you weren't blessed and had to scrimp and save to get what you wanted. That's a great story. From your perspective, was it a happy childhood though?
Well, I mean, my dad had 2 jobs. He always had 2 jobs. So he'd get up early in the morning, get up about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'd walk up to the farm, and he were a farm labourer with my dad. So he'd work from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon on the farm, and then he'd walk down to the local mill, Sam Holdings they called it back then, and he'd work 2 till 10 on the afternoon shift as a tackler, which is somebody that fixes looms. My mum were a weaver in the same factory, so I never saw anybody. They went to work first thing in the morning, and I was in bed at night when my dad come home at night. I saw my mum a little bit more than my father, but he was always at work, and that was 7 days a week. But back then, that's what you had to do just to put food on the table. It were proper hard.
Did you pass maths at school?
Maths? I was terrible. I didn't pass anything. I haven't got a single qualification to my name. Wow. Absolutely nothing. The teachers thought I was going to be a bum or a loser or both. But it's not where you start. What I like to say to people out there and people that's watching your podcast is, if you haven't got no qualifications, don't worry about it. There's always another way. If you've got loads of qualifications, fantastic, and you've got the chance to go to Oxford or Cambridge or whatever, wonderful. But there is another way if you don't, and I'm living proof of that.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it, really? Because there's a lot of pressure put on kids at school. And one of my daughters is now coming into she's in her final year at school, exams, etc., revision and, what to do next. There is like that feeling that you've got to be successful. You've got to get 10 GCSEs or the equivalent of that now. And I mean, me personally, I've got 3. I passed both my English exams and I passed geography. And I always say I don't know how I passed geography, Dave, because if it was to finding your way to school and I can understand that and putting your name at the top of the paper, I genuinely don't know how I passed it. But I did. But I've gone on and done lots of things as well. I've set up different companies, etc. And your life isn't over if you don't pass exams. And I think, as you say, you're living proof of that, aren't you?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I want people to take that away from your podcast. It's like the movie, the Bank of Dave movie. Not everybody's going to be able to set up a bank, but if people can be inspired from watching it, and I have a documentary series that's coming out on the 24th. If people can be inspired from watching the programs that I make, they don't necessarily have to open a bank, Steve, or a financial institution, but maybe they're inspired to go tomorrow morning after they've watched your show and think about maybe getting a pay rise or a new job or start a little business in the spare time, or maybe start a family, or just something that they're thinking about doing. And do you know what? Tomorrow morning, let's make it happen. Because that first step is the main one. When you're walking around the world, that first step is where everybody starts. And you've just got to get up tomorrow morning and make it happen. You can go to bed at night knowing you've made a mistake. We all make mistakes in business. But it's getting up tomorrow morning and thinking, I'm just not going to do that again. In business, you don't have to be brilliant. And I'm living proof of that because I'm far from brilliant. You don't have to be brilliant to be in business. You just have to avoid the big mistakes. I've got 6 companies, the biggest of which is in America. It's an investment company in America. And I left school with note. So if I can do it, a lad from Burnley who sells a few buses, then anybody can.
Tell us how the journey started then, because my first recollection of you was seeing you on the Channel 4 series, The Bank of Dave. But tell us why you went and started this procedure. Why did you set off on this mission?
Well, I just need to take you just a touch further back, just so you can understand why we got going with it. So after the chip shop episode, I remember I wanted to start a business. How do you start a business with absolutely nothing? Not even the price of a gallon of petrol. I wanted to sell cars. I had no money to sell cars. I didn't have any money to buy a car. But I thought, well, let's think outside the box. I went around all the local garages. I were asking, have you got an old part exchange car, van, anything that I can take away, sell, clean up obviously before I sell it, bring you the money back, and the difference is mine. And I found one on Bath Street in Nelson that allowed me to take one of their old part exchanges away. It was called Brian. He wanted £70 returning. Anything over that were mine. I advertised it for 100. I sold it for 97. 27 quid profit with my bad Burnley maths. And the profit then I put in my pocket. That were a week's wages back then. Went straight back up to Brian's, give him the money, earned that respectability, earned that integrity that I was going to come back with the money. Did it again and again and again until I had enough money. I learned another important lesson where if you can pay up front, you can negotiate a better deal. So one car after another, started buying cars with my own money. Always had a job at night as well. I worked in the nightclubs as a DJ at night to be able to put food on the table. I worked early in the morning on the markets, flogging tracksuits, T-shirts, sweatshirts, anything I could stuff in a suitcase. And I were down the local markets, the ones that sell to the hotels that are open at 3 and 4 in the morning. So day and night, I was working. And that's the only way. You know, if anybody's come on the podcast and thinks there's going to be an easy way to do this, it's not going to happen. The only way is hard work. Hard work will put you where some good luck can find you. You know, you have to put the graft in. Day and night, 7 days a week. There is no easy way. You know, we ain't going to win the lottery, or if you do, you're very lucky. You know, I'm not going on Love Island anytime soon. Although I might like to. There's no chance, you know. So the only way for me and for a lot out there is graft. Hard graft. So we were selling cars. I got myself a little car pitch. Ended up being offered a van. I got into vans. Vans were fantastic. Got lots and lots of customers for vans. And then I got offered a minibus. And I thought to myself, oh, I don't want a minibus. Have you no cars or vans? And they said, no, but we've got this minibus for sale there. And in life, you never know when these opportunities are going to come along. But when they do, you've just got to grab them with both hands because it's so important. So I scrubbed and cleaned this minibus up. I scrubbed all the 17 seats. It was a big, big thing. And it took me hours and hours and hours. But I did it in the end, you know. And I advertised it. And the phone rang and rang and rang. I'm ringing about the bus. And from that first bus, Steve, I become the largest supplier of minibuses in the country. So you just never know when them opportunities come. But when they do, be ready. So from there, we're missing lots out in between. Obviously, we haven't got hours and hours for this. So from there, go screaming forward to 2009 when this big banking crash started. And my minibus customers were coming to me for finance. And what we'd do, we'd fill the forms in, send them off to the local bank. The bank would send me the money for the bus. The customer would get the bus and they'd go and pick the kids up from school with buses and take people to the stag nights and the hen parties and things in the bus. And they'd use it and they'd be able to pay the loan back to the bank. No problem. But overnight, Steve, that just stopped. The banks just stopped lending. And I thought, well, have my customers done something wrong? Have they got a CCJ? Have they moved house without telling anybody? But you know what? They'd done nothing wrong. The problem was at the door of the High Street Bank. The banks just stopped lending. And I thought, well, you know, that's going to be a big problem. So I thought, well, if I understand the customers, if I understand what they're buying, of course I did. I built the bus. And I understand what they're going to do with it and where they live. Why don't I start lending them the money? They can pay me back and we'll try that. So I did. I lent them the money. They paid me back. And I thought, this banking malarkey, it's not that difficult. So I thought, how can I help other businesses and other people? I thought, I'll open a little community bank for the community to benefit the community rather than the bonus culture. I want to give the best rate of interest on the high street. I want to lend that money to people who can't borrow from a high street bank. And I then want to give the profit after the overheads to charity. You'd think to yourself, well, that sounds like a good idea. So I set off on that journey and it was incredibly difficult.
What was the most difficult thing for you, Dave, with this?
Well, as soon as I realised what I wanted to do, I thought, right, London, that's where all the bankers are. And you've got to be careful with that word. Down to London I went. And I met this guy called Andrew Hilton, which is epitomised really by people like Hugh Bonneville in the actual movie, where they say, I'm not the right sort of chap, you know. But I met Andrew Hilton, who's the head of the think tank of banking organisations, a proper banker. And he said to me, where are you from, Dave? I said, I come from Burnley. And that put him off for starters. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to open a little bank to help the community. And he said, well, what do your parents do? I said, well, my dad has 2 jobs. He works on the farmyard in the morning and he worked in the mill in the afternoon, and my mum were a weaver. He said, well, did you go to Oxford or Cambridge? I said, let me tell you about people that come from Burnley. We don't get them sorts of opportunities. I went straight to a building site. And he said, no. He said, you're not from the correct place. You're not from the correct family. You've not been to the correct school. You've got no chance. I wanted to stick him in a wheelie bin. You know, how can he tell me I've not got the correct family when my parents work day and night just to put food on the table? And this is what we're up against, Steve. And that was the biggest problem. The whole way through this process, I was up against institutions that just didn't think I was the right sort of chap.
I mean, when did the Channel 4 series come about then? Because, you know, they covered, you know, the rise, you know, to you know, the conclusion of this whole situation. When did they come on board? Did they approach you? Did you approach them? No,
they found out I'd set off on this journey. And I was on radio, BBC Radio Lancashire, talking to a guy called Tony Livesey, who's ended up a friend of mine, who's now on 5 Live. And I was telling him about it. And he said he's talking to a lady called Katie Lander, who owns a company called Fine Stripe, who's working for Channel 4, who's looking for something to film. And he said, I think it'd be a good idea for you to be filmed, David. He said, because it might help protect you against some of the bad people that's going to come after you. And he was really, really right. And that moment there changed my life again forever. Because I met Katie, Tony introduced me to them. Channel 4 said yes immediately. And they filmed the documentary series. And the remastered version of that is out on the 24th of March on Netflix. So people are going to be able to watch it. And that's what really happened, because we went up against all this organisation, because everybody said, no. Wherever I went, the cameras were following, but they were just following. They weren't helping. They were just following. But wherever I went, it was no. And as an entrepreneur, you've got to learn to turn them no's into yeses, because it's just easier for them to say no, because all the regulation, everything's stacked up towards the big banks. You know, you've got Fred the Shred there, who lost all those billions of pounds. And, you know, we got in a situation where the big banks needed bailing out, and they're about to need bailing out again. Literally, in the last few days, there's been 2 massive banks bailed out again. So it's still just as bad as it were. But Fred, he needed bailing out. He did all them terrible things, and they give him a knighthood, Steve. With me, they tried to put me in prison for helping people get the best rate of interest, lending to businesses who can't borrow from the bank, and then giving the money to charity. I were obviously a terrible person, you know. But I
was going to ask you, you know, what was your lowest point in this? You know, was there a day that you woke up and thought, you know what, I'm going to knock this on the head now? And you know, were your family supportive?
Well, to be honest, you've never ever got to give up. And throughout it, I just thought I was doing the right thing, you know. And I thought, well, I'm going to go all the way. It's whether the bankers are going to do the same. And I thought, well, if they're going to take me to court, which you see part of it in the movie, if they're going to take me to court, then they'll have to take me. And if they're going to lock me up, they're going to have to lock me up, and they're going to have to say why, you know. And if a judge puts me away, you know, he'll be putting me away for helping people. And I'll just stand up in court and I'm going to just say that. You know, it'd be like Free Deirdre. Do you remember Free Deirdre years ago? They'd be getting me out,
yes.
Yeah. They'd get me out because I was doing the right thing. And in the end, as you'll see in the documentaries, and I don't want to spoil the documentaries for your viewers and listeners, but in the end, you'll see exactly what happens and how it happens. And in the end, that, you know, they have to come to the party, because when you're doing the right thing in life, when going through hell, you've just got to keep going, because, you know, if you genuinely in your heart of heart know it's right, just keep going, because that will prevail.
What was it like that first day that you officially could say, we're open for business?
Well, I mean, I think in the first day, what I wanted to do is, the initial plan were, in the first 180 days of opening, I wanted to make the price of the overheads and make £1. If you could make £1 after the bills were paid, then the big banks were losing 2 and 3 billion at the time. I'd be £2 billion and £1 better off than the RBS. So my initial plan was to make £1 after the overheads were paid and then move forwards from there. But in the first few months, we made over 10,000 quid profit after the bills were paid, and we give that away to the Heart Foundation, to the Parkinson Society, to the hospice, and it just felt good. And I thought we need to do more of that, And now we've lent over £30 million to thousands of people and businesses across the UK. We've given tens and tens of thousands away across the country to good causes, and we've helped thousands of people start a business and get going. So it's one of those situations where we really do feel good about being there. I've never, ever took a penny. I've owned it for over 10 years. And it's just never been in my remit. But something very important to say here, it isn't just me. I've got a team there, headed up by a guy called David Henshaw, who has been in the banking industry. You can see him there on the corner of with his suit on, looking very smart. And he's been in the job nearly 60 years. And there's nothing gets past David H. He's the quintessential bank manager. And he's brilliant. His honesty and ethics and morals are second to none. And if David were running the Bank of England, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in now. And David does something special. He does manual underwriting, Steve. And manual underwriting, he's taught the team how to do this. It's an old-fashioned method, but it works, where you look at people as people. So if they've had a problem in the past, but they need to borrow some money now, it'll show up on the credit rating and records and everything. But David will look at that person and he'll think, well, maybe they've got divorced, or maybe they've had a problem with the business, but they've got over that. Maybe they've moved house or got a CCJ in the past, but they've paid it off. And he looks at what's happened. And if he can see that that person's got over that problem, he'll lend them the money. How can a computer 300 miles away make a decision about a florist in Accrington? David H makes decisions based on common sense and understanding the area and the product that person's buying. And that's an art that needs to be taught everywhere in banking, but it's just not. It's all about the computer saying no. And I think that's what makes such a big difference for us, is that we look at people as people and not as just objects.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. In Burnley, you say you left school early, and you went up, straight into graft working on the building sites. How did the people of Burnley, take to you now? I mean, it must be strange for you. Walking around the streets. I've been to Burnley for to watch Newcastle United play. In fact, I was there the couple of years ago when they were relegated, and it was it's a great place. I've got friends in Burnley myself, and it's a lovely place, and I know you do a lot for it. But what's it been like for you? Did you struggle a little bit at first with people who want to speak to you and stop you in the street, or have you always been an effervescent, friendly character?
Well, do you know what? It's been lovely, the comments that we receive. And when I see somebody and they want the picture taken, or they want to spend a couple of minutes chatting, or I'll be sat in a coffee shop and they'll come over and sit down. How wonderful is that, And it's just nice. I'm just Dave from Burnley. I'm just an ordinary guy that does extraordinary things. And I've been around the town a long time. And I just think that it's just part of where I'm from. And people say, well, are you going to move away? I don't want to move away. I don't want to move down south. I don't want to move to Monaco. I don't want to move to where it's sunny. I just like it in Burnley. I'm just, steak pudding, chips, peas and gravy on a Friday night, chippy tea. I feel like I'm living the dream. And I remember when we were filming the movie in Burnley, because it was important for me to film it in Burnley. It was very important that Netflix came and these big stars came. I remember Phoebe, who's got 400 million views on Bridgerton from Netflix, which is their biggest leading lady. She was the leading lady in the Bank of Dave movie, and there she is. And Phoebe came over from America. She'd just been shooting Bridgerton 2 in LA, and she was there with me in Burnley Market. Would you believe, Steve? having a chip butty on a cold, wet Tuesday afternoon, and she's thinking, what have I done? Where have I come from? But people were coming over having a chat to her, and within a few minutes, she just become part of the surroundings, and she just got stuck in, and we were having the crack with everybody, and she realised that it was just a friendly place to be. And for me, that were important. And Netflix, when I chatted to them about things, they really took it on board, and working with them was a real pleasure. When I said, we want to film in the train station in Burnley, we want to film in Burnley Centre, Burnley Market, Burnley council offices, Burnley courthouse, we just wanted to make it real. And there's Rory. I mean, he looks more like me than I do.
Yeah, did you have any part to play with the casting of it? Did you, or was that all left to to those the powers that be?
Well, I were a producer on the movie, and I really did get involved, and they allowed me to. And I remember when we were discussing who was going to play me, when I found out about the movie at first, a guy called Piers Ashworth was the reason it all come about was Piers Ashworth was in Hollywood having dinner with the voiceover guy from the original Bank of Dave series. And Piers Ashworth wrote Mission Impossible for Tom Cruise. He's a big writer of these big movies, and he wants to make a feel-good movie. And the voiceover guy from the original Bank of Dave's gone out to America and become a really big voiceover star out there. So he's having dinner, and they were chatting, and Piers were asking, and he said, "You want to speak to Dave?" So Piers said, "Dave?" He said, "Yeah, Bank of Dave." So he got me book, he read my book, and then he got me programs that I've made, and he thought, yeah. So he gave me a ring. He said, "Dave, I want to make a movie about your life," and this is a true phone call. And I said, "Well, you better get yourself to Burnley then." And he did, and he came, and we chatted about it, and I said to him, I said, "Who's going to play me?" He said, "Who would you like?" I said, "Well, Tom, because you knew him because of Mission Impossible." But I said to him, I said, "The only problem with Tom playing me is we're going to look like twins." So I said, "It's going to have to be somebody else." So the second choice were Rory Kinnear. All joking apart, Rory was always number one, because he looks too much like me, doesn't he? I mean, he's brilliant. His dad were Roy Kinnear, the famous movie star who was a fantastic comedian and actor. And Rory's just lovely. He came up to my house and he knocked on my door, Steve, and he said, "Dave, meet Dave." And I thought, "You'll do for me." and
Fantastic.
He was just brilliant all the way through.
Was it a bit surreal? I mean, going to the premiere, sitting down with your family and your loved ones, sitting and tucking into your popcorn or your hot dog or your Coke or whatever you had, and sitting watching your life story develop on screen. It must have been one of the most surreal moments of your life.
Well, what was really interesting was when we were talking about the premiere, obviously we were going to have the premiere in London at first. And I said to Netflix, I said, "I'd love to have the premiere in Burnley." And a premiere has never, ever been held outside London in history. And it's never been held in Burnley, that's for sure, because I Googled it to check. Have we had a movie premiere in Burnley? It didn't take long to Google. So I thought, well, let's have it in Burnley, because that's where all my friends are. Why have it in London when a lot of them won't be able to go? The people that took part and the people that's part of the community live in Burnley. So why don't we have it there? So Netflix thought that were a fantastic idea. So we brought all the Netflix team up and all the stars up from all over the world, came to Burnley, to the real cinema in Burnley. And we had it there. And I turned up in one of my buses because I thought, I'm not going in a limo, I'm going in a bus. So me and wife turned up in a bus, and then all the press were there and the media, and it ended up making headline news globally all over the world because it was the first premiere outside London, and that's what it were all about. It were all about doing it in Burnley for the right reasons, bringing the press to Burnley and showing Burnley in a very positive light. Because over the years, it's had some terrible press with the riots and the problems and the housing and whatnot. But why not bring it for the right reasons? And that's what we did. And we Burnley put on a fantastic show, and it really did put its best bib and tucker on that day.
I think one of the most Googled things after the film, if you watch the film, was Def Leppard. And that was ultimately because in the film, the feature, I'm not going to say too much about it, but obviously, charity fundraising concert. It features in the film. And I think a lot of people were Googling that going, how did I miss out on this? What's the story behind that? And how did you get Def Leppard in the film?
Well, do you know what? We give them a ring. I love singing, as you'll see in the documentaries. And I sing Def Leppard songs. And we thought we want a big ending. I mean, you've got to remember this is a movie, and they do have artistic license in movies, and especially big movies for Netflix. So they wanted a really big, lovely ending. And we thought, well, let's have a concert. And that would be wonderful. So do you know what? We give Def Leppard a ring. And they were brilliant. They said, yeah, we'll be in it. Because they're only from up the road in the northwest. They're only from Sheffield, these lads. Hull and Sheffield is where they come from originally. I mean, they were out in America doing a global tour. And they said, yeah, we're actually back on a certain day to see some friends. So we'll do it. And that's what they did. They came across and did the concert for us. And they were really good. And I remember being in the studio with them, doing the blue screen, green screen, whatever they call it, and looking up. And when you mentioned surreal earlier, Steve, me and my wife were there in this studio, looking up onto the stage, watching Def Leppard and watching Rory, who plays me, doing this similar mannerisms to what I do, and singing on stage with them. And I'm there 20 foot away from this happening. And I'm looking up and I'm thinking, wow. If nothing else happens in my life ever, I've peaked, And then Def Leppard come down off the stage after, and they spent some time with us, and we've become friends. And I'm going to the concert here in Britain because they're coming over to Britain for a couple of big concerts here this year as part of the global tour, and I've become friends with them, and I might just pop on stage with them when they're there this time, But what a fantastic thing to happen, everybody they'd heard of the story, even though they're in America. They'd heard of the Bank of Day story because I'd met a 4-part CNBC show in America, and they'd seen part of that, and they'd heard about the story, and they said, yeah, we'll come. I just thought that was fab.
Fantastic. Really, really is. I want to talk a little bit about the book as well, which again, just a story in general, how I took on the banks. I mean, did you write that yourself? Did you have a bit of help from a ghostwriter?
I wrote it myself. I wrote every single word of it, but because I had no qualifications, I were no good with the grammar and the full stops and stuff. I just tend to just write stuff and I don't put the right capital letters everywhere and all the rest of it. But my wife is very intelligent, which is helpful. She were a bioscientist. I'll tell you in a minute how we met because it's funny. But my wife did all the question marks and the punctuation and putting it into paragraphs. There she is, Nikki. We've been together a long time, and she's very, very smart. So what I did is I just sort of scribbled it all down, and she put it into sentences, if you will. And Virgin Books, Mr. Branson published it, and it became a Sunday Times bestseller. And that's another thing, if a lad from Burnley with nothing, no qualification, not even a CSE in English, if I can write a Sunday Times bestseller, then anybody can. It's just about having the heart for it.
Yeah, of course it is. And how did you meet? Because they do say behind every man is a great woman. You've already endeared to that, but how did you meet?
Yeah, Nikki. We met. I was working in a nightclub as a DJ, and she come over saying, playing crap music. And I probably were, because I never used to buy the new records, because back then I was, what would I be? 19 or 20 or whatever. Never had no money for fancy records. I used to go to the local flea market and give £1, 10 pence a piece for some old 70s stuff. And I'd play 10 70s records or 10 of the early 80s pop music or whatever. The fun stuff, the old 70s fun stuff. I'd play them instead of spending 20, 30 quid in Electron, which was the local record store, on 2 or 3 new number ones that'll be out of date in a week. So rather than have all the fancy new records, I used to have a box full of older stuff, but I was good at talking. So I'd do well on the mic and get the party music going, and we'd have fun at the nightclub anywhere. And she come over, she goes, have you got nothing new? And I said, you can look in my record box. So she rooted through my record. I told her not many girls get to look in my record box. And she found a record she liked, and that's how I met her. She comes from Wales, and she'd come up on a night out with her sister to Burnley. And she came over to the garage a few months later as we got friends, and she turned up in this new Citroen, which were her company car from the hospital where she worked. She was a bioscientist. She used to cut cancer cells up and look at what was wrong with people and diagnose people's cancer. And I thought, gosh, she's so intelligent, what's she doing with me? But she turned up in this new Citroen car, and she come to the garage, and I had an old car garage then with maybe 10 or 12 really old cars, and not one of them would start because just the batteries were so old. So I opened this diesel car that she had, and it had this great big diesel battery. And I thought to myself, whoa, look at that. So I got my jump leads out, and I connected the jump leads to this new diesel battery on her car. And I jump leaded every single car on my pitch, and it did it no trouble at all. So if there's any ladies watching your podcast, if you want to meet a man, you need a right good diesel battery. That's the future. So that clinched it for me.
Fantastic. How have your kids coped with this as well? I mean, I believe they've, they're both working now. I mean, did you make them work hard for the pocket money, Dave?
Well, they still do work hard. I keep them very much out of the media. They have very, very serious lives and very private lives. But I do mention them. One works with animals, very closely with animals and with animal charities. And the other one is a frontline police officer. So you can't cover them in cotton wool. You've got to let them get out there. And I allow my kids to do anything, but not nothing. And I say to them, look, whatever you want to do in life, I will help you as long as you help yourself. And it's important. You can't let children just sit at home in bed all day and just give them money. What I wanted to do is I wanted them to contribute to society. And the more I see them contribute to society, the more I'll help them. And I have 2 grandchildren as well. I have 2 little boys. And I'll do the same with them. I'll help them do anything, but not nothing.
It's fair enough, to be honest. I mean, you look at how things have progressed. I mean, how much would you estimate that you've probably loaned out since the bank that Dave started?
Well, we've lent out over 30 million. We are very small in terms of financial institutions, but very large in terms of a community financial institution. So I've got a big belief that we need community banks or community financial institutions run by the community to benefit the community rather than the bonus culture. I feel quite strongly about this. I got a letter not long ago from a little school around the corner from Bank of Dave writing to me saying, "Hi Dave, sorry, we'd really love a minibus, but we've no money for a minibus. But the kids are coming to school starving. They're coming to school hungry. Is there anything you could do? Could you give us some money?" So I actually contacted them themselves, and I said to them, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, we need food, and we need some industrial toasting machines, and we need it as quickly as possible. The kids are coming to school starving." So I said, "No problem." So I told them to send me a link of everything they needed, and I told my right-hand man, Matt, I said, just buy all that, buy them a year's supply of food, and then I told the school, 3 months before you run out of food, ring me again, and I'll buy you another year's supply of food. Now, the point I'm trying to make, Stephen, it's really important, is when you've got bankers on one side of this world where, unless we pay them tens and tens of millions of pounds bonuses, they say they're going to leave the UK and go somewhere else. And then on the other side of it, I've got kids coming to a local school around the corner from Bank of Dave who are starving to death, coming to school hungry. The parents can't afford to feed them. How's that right? That's just bonkers. This world needs levelling up. And I'm not political in any way, shape or form. I'm very bipartisan. I just think we need a net for people to fall on. And it just needs to be a little bit fairer than what it is.
I saw you quoted in an interview, it was a Daily Mail. I love this. People who rob banks go to prison, but banks who rob people get paid bonuses and get bailed out. I've got to be honest, I think you're speaking for virtually everybody in this country, how they feel at the moment. We've just had the budget. What did you make of that?
Well, there's lots of promises. There's always lots of, we'll give you this, but take that back off you. We just need, what I'd like to see is, as I mentioned, I'd like to see a net. I'm a big believer. If you work really hard, then you should have more than somebody that stays in bed all day and has the curtain shut. If you get out of bed early in the morning, you get out of bed like my dad did, 18-hour days, then you deserve a little bit more than somebody that doesn't want to go to work. But there's lots of people who can't go to work for various reasons, and they need to have a net to fall on as well. What we need is, if anybody's having a problem, they need to have a net to fall on that bounces them back up into society and allows them to push forwards again, and then they can contribute to society. You cannot have a system where you've got people putting 2 and 3 jumpers on who are actually dying in the cold. And then you've got people who are running the energy companies, taking billions, putting the price up of the bills. Well, that's just wrong. How does that work? We just need a fairer society. So what I'd like to see in the budget or future budgets, I'd just like to see things just a bit fairer. If you're making billions, then, it's wrong that other people are dying because they can't put the electric and gas on. This isn't a third world country. This is supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world. Why have we got people who can't afford to turn the light on and the gas on?
Oh, do you think we're too soft as a nation, maybe? Do you think that's half the problem?
I think what we do is we let them right at the top get away with murder sometimes. And I think we could just make it a bit fairer. I ain't got a problem with anybody making profit. I have 6 businesses. They all make profit, right? But I pay my share. What I'd like to do is, I think at the top, if you're truly making billions out of putting the price up astronomically, and there's no weights and measures on that, and it's something that everybody uses, you shouldn't be in charge of putting the price up. We all need gas and electric. So if you're in charge of gas and electric and you just keep putting the price up, then somebody somewhere needs to be in charge of, hang on a minute, you can't sell it at a loss. I get that. But to be truly making billions and then paying your staff millions in front of everybody on front page of newspapers, and then on the other side of it, kids are starving, parents and families can't afford to put the fire on, then that's wrong.
Yeah, it definitely is wrong. Have you got any ambitions left, Dave? I mean, you're the same age as me, 51 years of age. We hope, both of us, I guess, that we've got a lot of life left in front of us, but we never know what befalls us. But have you got any ambitions, or do you live like I do, just day to day?
Well, my dad used to say, he's passed away of Parkinson's now as my dad, but my dad used to say, every day you wake up, lad, and you're not feeling the wood sides, you're having a good day. And he said, lad, whatever you're going to do it now, because there'll be a time when you can't. So while I still can, Steve, I like to think of new things to do. On the 24th, I've got a documentary series due out on Netflix, my Banker Dave documentary series. I've got some really big things in the pipeline, some really, really exciting balls in the air, if you will. And as soon as one of them fall, I'm up and running again with something really big. But I also, at some point, I do need to go and sell a few buses. They've probably forgot what I look like at the garages. So, at some point, I try and mix everything in. Between the 6 businesses, I try and spend some time across the month in all of them. And I like working. I work live on ITV. I work live on BBC One. I work for Netflix. I've made 10 different documentaries. I've won 2 BAFTAs, 3 BAFTA nominations, an RTS, and 6 broadcast awards for the programs I've made around the world. What's next? I don't know. I like flying. I've got a TikTok site called @BankofDave. I only started it for a bit of fun, and I've had 51 million views in 12 months. And that shows the flying side of things. I love aviation, and I only started it for a bit of fun, and that's ended up becoming something that's quite big. So I don't know. Tomorrow I'll just do something else different and just keep going. Just keep going every day.
What advice would? Yeah, exactly. Well, you can.
Well,
what
I'm
advice?
Feeling the wood size, Steve. Every day we wake up and we're not feeling them wood size. You keep going.
What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about setting up a business at this moment in time?
If you're thinking about setting up a business, whatever it is you're thinking of, I mean, I'm the business doctor in the Mail Online, and I get a lot of people writing questions to me. And what I said to people is, look, if you're thinking of starting a little pub, for instance, or a little cafe or a little hairdressers, get a job part-time in the busiest little pub you can find or the busiest little cafe you can find locally. and watch what they're selling. What beers are they selling best? What food are they selling best? What entertainment goes down best? The decor on the walls will probably be paid for by a fancy architect. Take pictures of it and borrow the ideas. Don't try and think that you're going to set up and know everything, because you're not. But a part-time job at night or at weekends, or through the day if you've got time, to be able to learn everything, that will save you a fortune in money and a huge amount of time and a huge amount of mistakes, because you'll come out of there forearmed with all the information you need to start a little business. And if you can, keep the part-time job going while you start your little business, and then you can still pay the bills while you set up. I always had at least 1/2 jobs, as well as working for myself, for many years before I kicked the sticks away and the stabilizers, I call them, until I got to the point where I was really comfortable selling the vehicles, and I went from vehicles to property to land and all sorts of other things. But I always had a core business that, or a core job that would pay me enough to feed myself, because nobody else was going to do it.
You know, you're on social media. You mentioned TikTok. You're on Twitter. Do you get any trolling? Do you get any people attacking you? And if you do, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, if people want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Fishwick David. And you always get people that disagree with you, but I quite like the idea. If somebody wants to disagree with me, I ain't got a problem with that. I don't know everything. What I find is most wealthy people, they climb up a ladder when they've had some success, and they pull the ladder up. They climb up a tree, and you think, what are you frightened of? Why are you frightened of not letting other people know the secrets of it? Because, to be honest, I have all the things in life I need. I don't need anything else. So why would I be bothered about telling anybody anything that isn't true? I might as well give the secrets away. Why not? And I give them away free. I don't have one of these websites where I say, pay me this and I'll tell you all the secrets. I'll give it away free, and it will always be free. My advice will always be free, and it will always be real advice. Like I said, I've no business degree or anything, and I have a theory on that as well. There's a lot of teachers that teach business in colleges and universities and schools, and I'm sure they're good people, but most of them have never actually run a business. And the problem is, it's a bit like getting in an aeroplane with somebody that's watched all the DVDs and read all the books, but never actually took off, And this is the problem. What I'd like to see is more business people who've made a success of what they've done, showing people for free how to do it, not charging somebody to come to some website to tell them a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think with social media, it's just there should be a little bit more control over it. I think there's a lot of things that get out there. The internet's a wonderful thing, Dave, and businessmen can use it to their advantage. But there can be a lot of negativity. Maybe it just needs cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if somebody's got an argument, what you've got to do, Steve, is you've got to get to the point where you can argue their point better than they can, and at that point, you will win.
Yeah, that's a good point. With regards to the football club, obviously we do a lot of football chat on NUFC matters, but all about Newcastle United. I mean, Burnley Football Club that features in the film. Did you used to go, or do you go when you can? Are you a big football fan? Are you a casual football fan?
I love football. I don't get as much chance to go as I used to, but I used to have a stand at Burnley Football Club for 15 years. I had the David Fishwick stand, which was the away stand. So if anybody from Newcastle came down to watch a game, then they'd have sat in my stand. And I had it for many years, and I loved it dearly. And I've helped the club many times financially in the past. They don't need that now, but I've sponsored them heavily many years ago when things were a bit tougher for them than they have been for the last 10 years. But then a big gambling site came along and offered a lot of money for my stand. And the club rang me up and said, "What do you want to do, Dave?" And they were really good to the club. They said, "Look, if you don't want to part with it, then, we're happy to leave you up there." And I said, "Look, if they'll give a huge amount of money, then I know the club need the money, let them have it." So for many years, I was there every single game. But when the stand went, I hadn't gone just as often as I did in the past, but I still get a chance to go. I'm still a big friend of the owners then and the owners now. and the American owners, they seem really cool. And when I went along to ask Alan Pace if I could film at Burnley Football Club as part of my movie, he said, yes, no problem, Dave. And he was really, really helpful. So I haven't got a bad word for the club. You know, what a fantastic thing to have in a little town like Burnley. I mean, you can fit all of Burnley people. 65,000 people live in Burnley. You can fit all them in Manchester United's football ground, you know. And when you're in the Premiership, like we were for a few years, when you can be in a Premiership with only 60,000 people living in the town, you know, you're batting above your average, you know. And every penny counts, and we ain't got the money to be able to buy these big superstars. And as soon as somebody offers us some money for something, then we've got to stand aside and let them have it, because it's for the greater good of the club and the community. I was a bit gutted when I lost my stand to a gambling company. If it had gone to somebody else, that wouldn't have bothered me the same. But to a gambling company, I was a bit bothered. But do you know what? If it helps the club and the community, then I stood down and allowed that to.
Well, the Championship table makes good reading at the moment. Burnley are top, 13 points clear, Dave.
Living the dream. We're coming back. But in company, a good manager, though. What a lovely, lovely man he is, you know. And he's really good. And you know, very approachable. In my movie, you'll have seen Sean Dyche in the movie.
Yeah, what's he like? Because I mean, I've been lucky enough to meet him. I used to do a little bit of work for Rafa Benitez, and I got a chance to meet Dyche just briefly. Nice guy. Seems exactly the way that he comes across on TV. You know, an affable, friendly guy.
Do you know, the first time I met Sean was when he come over at first many years ago, and he just took over the club. And I was in a restaurant in Burnley, and he'd come out for a night out with his friend. And do you know what? He came over to me. I had my stand at the time, and he came over to me and pulled his chair up and introduced himself, and he just had the crack. And I thought, do you know what? You're proper. You know, he could have just sat, you know, back of the room, out the way of everybody, but he come and sat over and he had the crack. And I just thought, what a fantastic manager. And without Sean, we wouldn't be where we are. You know, company's done a fantastic job, don't get me wrong. But if it weren't for the building of the bricks with people like Barry Kilby, who's a friend of mine as well, who was the chairman of Burnley Football Club, and Sean Dyche, it just wouldn't have happened in the way it did, you know. And I've met all the managers, but they've all been really good to talk to. You know, they've always been good with sponsors and fans, but Sean was special. And when I rung Sean up and said, you know, would you mind being in my movie? He was actually in the football club at the time, and we was outside filming at the club, and he just come outside. And he had his shorts on, as you see him in the movie. And that's exactly how he was. He just come out in his shorts. He said, where do you want me, Dave? You know, where's the makeup? I said, they're ripped on. And,
last couple of questions. Do you have a motto, Dave?
I think I like to borrow my father's motto, which is, whatever you're going to do it now, because there'll be a time when you can't, and have the courage to follow your dreams.
And any superstitions?
Not really superstitions, but if people can stick to the 4 rules, rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. And rule number 3, which is the most important, rule number 3 is never give up. And rule number 4, Steve, the most important one of all, and if it's the only one that anybody takes away from the podcast today is this one, it'll be fantastic. Rule number 4 is never, ever give up.
Dave Fishwick, it's been an absolute pleasure. Give a quick plug again to what's coming up in those of you who'd like to follow Dave's life. I'm sure go to Netflix, watch the film, go to Amazon, buy the book. But what else is coming up? What can people look forward to?
So on the 24th of March, Netflix are releasing the Banker Dave series, which is all about exactly what did happen. So people will be able to watch it for real. And anybody that's watched the movie will probably have it come up on their screen about it. Anybody that watches the documentary, they won't then want to go and watch the movie. The book itself, as you said, is Banker Dave book, Sunday Times bestseller. They can catch me on TikTok at Bank of Dave, or on Twitter at Fishwick David. And keep your eye on the media, because I've got a couple of really big things coming.
Exciting times, Dave. Hopefully we'll get you back on at some point to talk about those. But for now, thanks for giving up your time, mate. And love to you and the family. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, Steve. Real pleasure. See you again soon.
Bye-bye. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay as you go, waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from mrvickies.co.uk or by calling 01768 210 102. Welcome aboard to Fruy Vita Getaways. You can email them at fruivitagetaways@gmail.com. Call or text them 0792 842 7895. Please join and share their Facebook group as well at Fruy Vita Getaways. Book your holidays or short breaks in the UK or around the world with them. Let them find your happy place. ABTA and ATOL registered. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. And the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com, where you can buy lots of t-shirts and merchandise. If you want to subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button underneath this video today. It is free to do so. Hit the thumb up to like the video. It's good for the algorithm. And click share to your other social media. If you do subscribe, we do send you a free car sticker. To get that, email john@nufcmatters.com and he'll post you one out. If you want to join the NUFC Matters cult, then put your smartphone over this QR code now and it will take you straight there. Alternatively, go to the website, nufcmatters.com, and you can join for a one-off payment of £25. You'll receive a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, and entry into the monthly draw. You can also join via YouTube, and if you click join beneath the video, you will see a variety of prices and how you can support the channel. You can alternatively make a donation with a super chat in the chat tonight. Just click the $sign. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast providers. We also help the food bank on this show. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk is where you'll find the matchday bucket, and you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. As always, we've got a whole host of events coming up throughout the year. An evening with Nobby Solano takes place on Saturday the 25th of March at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley at Leamington Labour Club. Tickets are £20. 31st of March. And you can get them direct from the venue. An evening with Nobby Solano. Good Friday the 7th of April at 4 p.m. Tickets are a tenner and available behind the bar at Felling Cricket Club in Gateshead. An evening with Supermac, hosted by Gibbo at the Tynemouth Surf Cafe, Tuesday the 11th of April. And tickets direct from the venue. This is a limited ticket event, only 35 tickets available, so book soon. And an evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday the 20th of April. Tickets are £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. In June, Rob Lee will be at Louis' Liquor Store in Newcastle, and you can get tickets direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark, John Beresford takes place the following evening, Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth. This is in aid of the Heel and Toe charity, and tickets are available from their website, www.heelandtoe.org.uk/events. And if you're a boxing fan, the Night of Champions comes to Gateshead at the Fed. Frank Bruno, Ricky Hatton, Nigel Benn, and Joe Calzaghe are part of the UK tour, and you can get your tickets from www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk.